Good morning! I am so excited for today's list of stories. So it is currently, it's almost 6. It's June 25, day 3. So it's already midweek for us canvassers, but my stories are from yesterday. So in the morning, it was a pretty dry morning. I was in mostly Spanish territory. It wasn't really Spanish territory, but more than half of the people I was meeting speaks only Spanish, and so I had learned a little bit about the Spanish canvas yesterday. So I knew how to introduce myself and a little bit about the books, but I hadn't quite memorized all of it. So I'm still working on my flashcards trying to memorize the Spanish canvas. And then so I was just going door to door and I was just like, Lord help me, Lord help me. But it was a pretty dry morning, so CJ picks us up to do some cleanup, and then he drops us off at this. It's almost like a little plaza, but they're apartments, and it's in a U shape. And so I start at one end, and the first door I knock on is like this big buff guy comes to the door, and I was like, "Hi, my name is Gabrielle." This was in English. Hi, my name is Gabriella. Blah blah blah. Show him the habits he's interested, and I show him. Instead of like I didn't have my usual handset because I was holding both Spanish and English. I changed up my books a little bit, so that it flowed better. So I had Peace Above the Storm instead of The Great Controversy, or LOL, as my second book that I was showing. LOL is Lessons of Love. And so I show Peace Above the Storm, and I say, oh, this is for, helps you find freedom from worry, guilt, and fear. And he goes, is like, oh, okay. And then I close him off with the donation ranges, and then he says, oh, okay, let me see what I have. And then he comes back with a $20 bill, and I was like, oh, for that donation you can actually have, oh, he only wanted the habits. I said, oh, for that donation you can actually get the habits as well as another book of your choice. He's like, okay, let me look at that piece one again. And I was like, are you interested in history? And I pull out the GC and I show him that, follows the path of freedom from the dark ages all the way to America's role in current world events. And he goes, I think it was some YouTuber. He's like, oh, I've heard this guy talk about Great Controversy. I wasn't familiar with who he was talking about, but I was like, oh, I'm not really familiar with him, but it's a wonderful book, blah 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 blah. Tell him like personal experience as well as the canvas, and then he's like, okay, I'm gonna get them. So I end the morning off with a 2-book set of a habit and a GC, and I just really love it when you get that those spiritual books out, and that's really an answer to prayer. In the afternoon I start off, and then it's another thing where it's like just a row of apartments. Most of these apartments are smaller apartments, so some of them are like 3 to 5 units, and then so I think this was in a 5-unit one, and then every single door Spanish, and then so I got to practice my Spanish canvas a little bit, but I wasn't getting any books out. Move over to the next apartment. First door I knock on in that apartment, this guy opens up, and then and I was like, oh, do you prefer Spanish? And then so I bring out my 2 Spanish books, and it was Cocina Natural and Paz. And then so Paz is the equivalent of Peace Above the Storm, and then Cocina Natural is we used to have a cookbook called Naturally Cooking, which we replaced with Simply Fresh, and so that was the Spanish equivalent of that book. And then so usually we don't show cooking books to guys, but he was interested in both, and so he got the Paz and the Cocina. And then so it was just really a great experience that I got these 2 book sets, and then it's like, I can kind of communicate in Spanish, and it was just really an exciting experience. And then so I go through the apartment, a few more houses, and then finally I get to this one lady, and she's like, oh, what is this about? And so you'll get people who are inquisitive, like, okay, and just pretty much checking out that you're legit, that you know what you're doing. Okay, what school do you go to? What is the scholarship for? Why are you doing these? What are these books? So you just go door to door, like, aren't there other scholarships, other jobs, other things you could be doing? And I actually kind of like it when they ask that, because I get to share my story. And when you have an opportunity to do that, they say, there are really three things that people are excited about, that people can get excited about when you're at the door. One is your books, the two is your mission, and three is you. So sometimes I get people who are not interested in what I'm doing at all or in the books, but they're like, I believe in you as a student, and let me give you a donation. I'd rather get a book out than, honestly, I'd rather get a book out than a donation, because these books really do change lives. And so sometimes it's like, your donation covers the book, just take the book. But we can't force that on people. Those are the three things you get people excited about. And so when people start asking me questions, I can share a little bit more about myself, and I can tell them about what my mission is, and why are you doing this? There are other jobs. Well, we want to do something positive for the community. This is a chance to share our faith and share good news to people, to promote whole wellness from physical wellness, because we have those health books, as well as spiritual wellness and peace and emotional wellness. And so we're just promoting health in the community, as well as sharing our faith. And so I get to share a little bit about what my mission is, and through this work we're able to get a little bit of money for school. And so we're able to do good work, as well as support our education. And that's kind of what I say at the door when they start asking what my mission is. And then so this lady was just drilling me, and then finally she goes, and then I had shown her several spiritual books, because she did mention she was a Christian. And then she said, she said she studies her Bible, so I showed her the answer book. I showed her Lessons of Love, and I said, what book in the Bible are you studying? She said Daniel. And so I bring out the Daniel Chronicles, and then she says, oh, that's actually part of our curriculum already. And so this isn't an Adventist, she doesn't go to an Adventist church, but they're studying Daniel Chronicles, and that's really amazing, and the people are interested in this. And then so she's like, you know what, I'm actually the head of this scholarship foundation, and they work with kids as young as the 8th grade to get them placed in good high school. So they interview them, provide them with like skill building material, and they try to place them in good high school so that they can get into good colleges, and they provide them with a SAT and the ACT prep, so that they can and then help them find scholarships as well to finance those, to finance their tuition, either in private high schools as well as in college. And then so she's like, so I do appreciate what you're doing and the hustle. And so that was the word she used. And then so she goes, okay, let me see what I have. And so she comes back with a donation, and then we're able to pray together. And that is, I didn't get any books out. I was able to give her what do you call this? Living in the Sunlight, which is our little book that helps deal with stress. And then so I left that door, and then Lisa actually came up with me and then started helping me out. And then so I went to this one particular door, and it was this lady, and she was just so excited, asking us how we were doing. She was just such a happy person. And then so Lisa noticed that her shirt said Jesus Christ, and then I forget what the whole quote was, but it had Jesus in there somewhere. And then she was like, oh, what's your faith? What's your religion? How long have you been a Christian? And then so she shares a little bit about her testimony, how she became a Christian, was able to give up smoking. She was sober already before she even became a Christian. But then she asked prayer for her daughter, and that because her daughter had went into the life of drugs and was in bondage in that. And then so we were just praying that her daughter would find freedom through Christ. And then so she really wanted to buy a book, but she didn't or get a book, and then but she didn't have any money on her, and I feel kind of bad because I did have that donation, so I should have offered the book, but I had forgotten about the donation, and so I wish I offered the book because she was really excited about the books, as well as our mission. And so anyway, we prayed with her, and then I left her with a little glow track, and then so we move on, and then for this one, a lot of Spanish territory. I got another Cocina en Paz set, Cocina en Paz. I don't know if I actually have my record from last night. Yeah, so I got 2 cocinas, 3 paz, 1 Príncipe de Paz, and then so I went to this one apartment, and it was this guy, and I saw he had a son, and so I was showing him story time, and he was like, oh, I don't really understand English. And then so I switch over to my Spanish canvas, which I don't know if I'm more understandable in Spanish because it was really broken Spanish, and then he ends up getting Paz and Príncipe de Paz, and I thought I had given him the Spanish piece above the store, and then so I was going down a few apartments, and I look and then in my bag and put it to replace the one in my handset. And then I looked down, and then I have 2 paz in my handset. So I was like, oh no, I gave him the English book. And so like I ran back, he was on the 2nd floor too, ran back around the apartment, went upstairs, and he goes, hi, sorry to bother you. But I think I gave you the English. Would you prefer the Spanish? So I switched him out for the Spanish, and he looked through my set again. He's like, do you actually have the English version of Príncipe de Paz? And then he's like, oh, yeah, I do. And he said, oh, because I have a daughter, and I think she'd prefer English. And then so I switched him out with the Prince of Peace. And then so he got a Paz and Prince of Peace set. And then so later that night, I was also, so first I was able to get 4 Feliz para siempre out, which is our drop down for Spanish. And so this is like, whatever you feel like donating, here's a book for you. And so he so like I've been to several houses, they didn't get a book, but they donated something, and then so I got Feliz out. Second to the last door of the night, I was at this guy's house, and then so he's like, oh, I don't have money, blah blah blah. And then so I dropped down with Feliz para siempre, and then I was like, oh, it helps with stress. And then he was like, oh, stress. And then he was trying to talk to me in Spanish, and I was just like, sí. And then he goes, and I picked up a few words here and there, and so he was like, it really helps with stress from work, from, family, finances, and he's like, but God is there. And then I was like, yes, God is amazing. And then I offered prayer. And then so when I pray, I still pray in English because I don't have any alternate that I can pray in. And then so I prayed in English for him. And he was like, oh, your Spanish is so good. And I'm like, like I might get a little bit of the pronunciation right, but but it was really broken Spanish. And I was just so happy that I was able to minister to people in another language, and it was just such an exciting experience. I took sign language in high school instead of Spanish, and so this is a completely new experience for me. And then so he got the Feliz para siempre, and then so we were able to pray together. And then so I go to 2 doors down. I meet this guy, and he was like, oh, not really interested. I was showing him the English books, and then his mom comes in, and she's speaking Spanish, and then I was like, hola, your mom. And then so I say, oh, let me switch you out for the Spanish books for your mom. And then so she looks the Cocina Natural over, as well as Paz, and she's like, oh, I already have these, the cocina. And she's like, oh yeah. I was like, oh, did people come by last year? And she's like, yeah, they were so nice, whatever, blah blah. And then this guy walks up with, I was guessing his daughter. She was sleeping, but he was carrying her into the apartment. And then I was like, oh, we also have, and then I introduced Príncipe de Paz, and the children's story, and talks about Jesus, Old Testament, And then he's like, oh, okay. And then so they weren't going to get the piece or the cocina, and then the guy really wasn't interested. And the mom looks at him and says something in Spanish, so I can only assume that she told her to, like, go get that book. He's like, oh, okay, okay, whatever. And then so he goes down, and then so, like, goes to his car, gets the money, and I could already, and this was already past 8:30, so I could already see CJ waiting. He had already picked up the other students, and they were waiting. And then so, like, the guy gets the money, have a little bit of a conversation about what he's doing, and he's actually an engineering student, so we were able to bond a little bit over that. But he did get that Príncipe de Paz, and so it was a little bit of a funny experience where the mom just stepped in and say, hey, no, you get this book. So that's all for today. I can't even explain how much of a wonderful experience it was, and it's really motivated me to really study that Spanish canvas, and to be able to minister to other people in a different language. Bye.